Nyvenne Ashcael had counted 412 sunless days since the Concord dragged her out of the wreckage of her home reef. She had stopped counting the dead. Her scales, once the deep violet of the Ashcael tide clans, had gone gray at the edges, a sickness the overseers called drift fade and never explained. She didn't need them to. She'd seen it happen to 100 others before her, and she knew exactly where they went when the fading finished. Tonight, though, something was different. Tonight, the collection drones didn't come. She sat in processing bay 9, chained by the wrist to a bench built for creatures twice her size, listening to the low mechanical hum of a facility that never slept and never explained itself. Around her, 36 other captives sat in the same silence. A Threll elder with cracked shell plates, a pair of Ordu younglings, barely old enough to have names, a single Creven soldier, his forearms bound in magnetic cuffs, glaring at the far wall like he could will it into rubble. The lights flickered, once, twice, nobody in the bay moved, nobody dared hope. Then the wall behind the guard station hissed open, not through any door Nyvenne had ever seen used, and a human stepped through wearing a stained maintenance vest, a tool belt over one shoulder, and an expression like a man walking toward his own execution. "Anyone here still got fight in them?" he asked in a voice too quiet for the guards 2 corridors over to hear. "Because in about 90 seconds, that door behind me locks for good, and I need to know if you're coming or staying." Nyvenne's chain rattled as she sat up straighter. 90 seconds wasn't very long at all. His name, he told her later, was Callum Reyes. 4th-generation facility technician. 3rd generation to never ask what happened to the crates that left Bay 9 and never came back. "My grandfather wired half this station," he said, working the cuff release with a stolen keycard and hands that shook just slightly. Told himself it was just infrastructure. My father told himself the same thing. I almost did too. The cuff snapped open. Nyvenne rubbed the raw skin beneath it, watching him. "What changed?" she asked. Callum didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened instead, like the words cost him something to say. "3 weeks ago I was running cable through the sub-level archive," he finally said, moving to the Creven soldier's restraints next. "Found a shipment manifest that wasn't supposed to exist. Genetic yield reports, regeneration markers, radiation tolerance indexes." He looked up, and for a moment his eyes weren't calm at all. "They're not detaining you people," he said. "They're farming you." Behind him, the Creven soldier went very, very still. The word hit the bay like a dropped stone. Farming, harvesting, not prisoners, inventory. The Threll elder made a sound low in her throat, something between a prayer and a curse. One of the Ordu younglings started to cry, and the other one held them, silent, dry-eyed, too old for their years already. "How many facilities like this one?" Nyvenne asked. "Are there?" Callum's silence answered before his words did. "I don't know," he said. "That's what scares me. They moved through the maintenance arteries of the station, like blood through a vein nobody had mapped. Callum leading, Nyvenne close behind, the Creven soldier bringing up the rear with the restless energy of a predator finally uncaged. At a junction, thick with steam and rust, Callum stopped so suddenly, Nyvenne nearly collided with him. "Wait," he whispered, raising a fist. Down the corridor, a maintenance panel slid open on its own. Someone, or something, was already waiting for them. If you're enjoying this story so far, do hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the upcoming videos. It genuinely helps the channel grow, and there's a lot more coming for this one. The figure stepping out of the shadows wasn't a guard. It was a girl, maybe 15 years old, in a security-issue jacket 2 sizes too big, with a homemade signal jammer strapped to her forearm like a piece of jewelry she'd built herself out of spite. "You're later than you said," she told Callum, not even glancing at the aliens behind him. "Traffic," Callum said dryly. "Nyvenne, this is Priya. She hacks things that shouldn't be hackable." Priya finally looked past him, at Nyvenne, at the Creven soldier, at the Threll elder cradling the 2 younglings, and her expression shifted from irritation to something colder. "Oh," she said quietly. "There's more of you than the manifest said." That was somehow the most frightening sentence Nyvenne had heard all night. Priya led them deeper still, into a chamber that had clearly once been a supply closet and was now something closer to a war room. Screens duct-taped to the walls, cables spliced into ceiling conduits, a single flickering light strip casting everything in sickly blue. "This is everything I've pulled off the internal network in the last 6 months," she said, gesturing at a wall of scrolling text. "Shipment logs, lab requisitions, personnel rotations." She tapped one file, and it expanded. Rows and rows of names, species, dates. Dates that stopped. Permanently. "This is Facility 9, she said. "There are 12 others just like it, maybe more." "You built all of this yourself?" Nyvenne asked, looking around at the spliced cables, the stolen monitors, the sheer scale of what a 15-year-old had assembled in secret. Priya didn't look up from her keyboard. "My mother worked logistics on this station for 9 years, she said. "Cargo manifests, mostly. Boring stuff. Then one day she started asking questions about a manifest that didn't add up, and 2 weeks later she was reassigned to a facility on the far side of the system. I haven't heard from her in 8 months." "You think she found something?" Callum said quietly. It wasn't a question. "I know she did," Priya said. "I've been trying to prove it ever since." Nyvenne stepped closer to the screen, her chest tightening in a way that had nothing to do with the drift fade eating at her scales. "My reef," she said slowly. "The Ashcael tide clans. Are we—" She stopped herself. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Priya's face had already answered it. 61 names, Priya said gently. "From your world alone. You're the 62nd. Nyvenne's claws curled tight enough to draw blood from her own palms. She was the last one they hadn't finished processing yet. She hadn't spoken of her reef to anyone since the night it burned. But something about the sterile blue light of that supply closet, and the weight of 61 names, loosened something in her chest that 400 days of silence hadn't managed to. "We didn't have soldiers," she said quietly, not entirely sure why she was saying it now. "Not like your Craven armies or your human militaries. We had sentinels, keepers of the deep archive, trained to memorize the Tide clan's entire oral history, generation after generation, in case the physical records were ever lost." Callum looked up from the terminal he'd been working. "Is that what you were?" "I was training to be," Nyvenne said. "I was 3 seasons from my final rites when the Concord ships came." She remembered it in fragments, the way trauma tends to arrive. Not as a single memory, but as pieces that refused to fit back together in order. The sky above the reef turning the wrong color. Her mentor's voice telling her to run, to hide the youngest ones in the deep coral first. The sound the ships made, a low humming drone that she still heard sometimes in her sleep, indistinguishable from the machinery of the very facility that had processed her. "They didn't want soldiers," she said. "They wanted specimens. My reef didn't fight back with weapons. We fought back by hiding our children in the one place we thought the Concord scanners couldn't reach." "Did it work?" Callum asked, already dreading the answer. "For 6 of them," she said, "out of 43. The Threll elder in the corner, who had introduced herself only as Saja and had said very little since the escape began, spoke for the first time in over an hour. "The sentinels of my own people kept a similar tradition," she said softly. "Before the Concord came for us too. We called it the unbroken thread, the idea that as long as one person remembered, nothing was ever truly lost." Nyvenne turned to her, surprised. "You know the tradition?" "I know it because my people had one just like it," Saja said. "Every conquered species seems to invent the same comfort in the end. Memory as the last form of resistance left to us." "Then let's make sure," Nyvenne said, "that this time, memory isn't the only form of resistance we have left." The Craven soldier, who had introduced himself eventually in a low growl as Dresk, slammed one fist against the bulkhead hard enough to dent it. "Then we burn this place to ash," he snarled. "Every lab, every overseer, every drone. And become exactly what they say we are." Nyvenne said, quiet but firm. Animals who only understand blood. Dresk went rigid at that, and for a moment Nyvenne thought she'd pushed too far. When he finally spoke again, his voice had lost its edge of pure rage, replaced by something older and heavier. My clan brother said something like that to me once, he said. Before the Concord took him, he believed restraint was strength. I believed strength was the only language they respected. His 4 hands curled slowly into fists, and just as slowly, uncurled again. I have not seen him since the day they separated us at intake. I don't know which of us was right. Maybe neither of us has to be, Nyvenne said. Maybe we just have to be the ones who're still here to decide. Dresk turned on her, 4 arms tensing. You would let them keep taking us? Keep farming us, while you talk about mercy? The room went very silent, waiting to see which one of them would move first. It was Callum who broke the standoff, not with a weapon, but with a single word. Neither, he said. Both of them turned to look at him. We don't burn it down, he continued. And we don't beg for mercy from people who've already decided we're livestock. We show everyone, every worker, every citizen, every soldier on this station, exactly what's happening in the sublevels. And we let them decide what kind of species they want to be. Priya was already nodding, fingers moving across her keyboard. The station's emergency broadcast override, she murmured. It reaches every screen, every deck, every ship in dock. Dresk didn't look convinced. Not yet. But he didn't look away either. Building the broadcast took 3 days they didn't have. 3 days of stolen ration packs and shallow sleep, of Priya splicing together security footage frame by frame, of Callum disappearing for hours at a time to steal components from restricted sections, returning each time paler, quieter, more haunted by what he'd seen. On the second night he came back holding something small wrapped in cloth. Inside it was a child's carved toy, a tiny reef fish, hand-shaped from driftwood in the unmistakable style of the Ashcael tide clans. Nyvenne didn't ask where he'd found it. She already knew. Promo break. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you catch part 2. But not everyone in that supply closet believed in Callum's plan. Not everyone believed in mercy at all. There was a 5th person in their circle by then, a station clerk named Osric Bell, who Priya had recruited weeks earlier for his access to personnel records. He sat in the corner most nights, quiet, useful, unremarkable. Too unremarkable in hindsight. Because on the 3rd night, while the others slept in shifts, Osric slipped out of the chamber with a data chip in his pocket that didn't belong to him. Nyvenne woke first, some instinct honed by 400 nights of captivity when found his cot empty. Callum, she whispered, shaking him awake. Bell is gone. Callum was on his feet before he'd even finished blinking the sleep away, already pulling up the internal camera feed Priya had rigged weeks earlier. The footage showed Osric in a service corridor 2 decks up, standing very still in front of an overseer's office door. Talking. They couldn't hear the words. They didn't need to. They watched Osric hand over the chip, watched the overseer's expression shift from irritation to alarm to something colder and more calculating. Watched Osric turn to leave, and then watched the overseer's hand close around his arm instead. He's not walking away from this either, Dresk observed grimly. That's not the part that matters, Priya said, voice tight. The part that matters is they know. Everything. The broadcast plan, the timeline, all of it. The countdown they thought they had, 3 days, had just become minutes. We move now, Callum said, already stuffing gear into a bag. Half-finished broadcast or nothing. Half-finished isn't enough, Priya snapped back. I need the archive footage from Bay 4 to prove the yield reports aren't isolated to us. Without it, the Concord spins this as one rogue facility, one bad overseer, and nothing changes anywhere else. Nyvenne looked between them, feeling the walls of their timeline collapsing in real time. Then someone goes to Bay 4, she said. Now, while they're still busy deciding what to do about Bell. Dresk volunteered before anyone else could speak, forearms already flexing with barely restrained violence. No, Nyvenne said. If a Kryvan soldier goes storming into Bay 4, every alarm in this station lights up in seconds. It has to be quiet. She looked at her own hands instead, clawed, gray-edged, still healing from 400 days of captivity. It has to be me. Callum's jaw tightened. Absolutely not. You didn't ask permission when you opened my cuffs, she reminded him. I'm not asking now either. Promo break. If this story's got you hooked, comment your prediction for what happens next and don't forget to subscribe. The maintenance route to Bay 4 ran directly beneath the Overseer's primary security checkpoint, a detail Priya delivered with visible reluctance, tracing the path on a stolen schematic with one shaking finger. There's a 2-minute gap in patrol rotation, she said. 2 minutes, Nyvenne, not 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Then I'll need 1 minute and 50, Nyvenne said, tightening the stolen tool belt around her waist. Callum caught her wrist before she could move toward the access hatch. Come back, he said simply. No speech, no plan, just that. Only reason I know how, she answered and dropped into the shaft. The tunnel beneath the checkpoint smelled like ozone and old rust, and every clang of her claws against the metal rung sounded, to her own ears, loud enough to wake the entire station. She counted her own heartbeat instead of the seconds, forcing her breathing to slow, to quiet, to match the rhythm of a sentinel trained since childhood to move unseen through her own reef's hunting grounds. Above her, boots passed along the checkpoint floor, paused, moved on. She kept climbing. Bay 4 was smaller than Bay 9 and far more heavily secured, a detail that told her more than anything else exactly how important its contents were. She found the archive terminal exactly where Priya's schematic promised it would be, and plugged in the stolen data drive with fingers that refused to stop trembling. The download bar crawled forward, 10%, 20. Then, behind her, the door hissed open. She didn't turn around immediately. She recognized the voice before she saw the face. You're not supposed to be down here, Osric Bell said quietly, standing in the doorway with a stun baton raised, his expression somewhere between guilt and desperation. None of us were. That's the whole point. You sold us out, Nyvenne said, not moving from the terminal, watching the download bar climb past 40%. I bought my daughter's contract release, Osric said, voice cracking. She's 11. She's been in the Concord's education debt program since she was 6. You don't know what that's like on watching your kid owe a corporation her whole childhood? So you traded ours instead, Nyvenne said quietly. For a long moment, neither of them moved. I didn't know it would be like this, Osric said, gesturing helplessly at the terminal, at the archive, at everything he'd apparently only half understood before tonight. I thought, detention, labor contracts, not... His voice broke off entirely as his eyes found the nearest monitor, still displaying a frozen frame from the yield reports. A Threll child, restrained, a serial number stamped where a name should have been. The stun baton in his hand lowered an inch. 60 seconds. Priya's voice crackled through Nyvenne's earpiece, tight with panic. Downloads at 60%, patrols coming back early. Nyvenne kept one eye on the terminal and one on Osric, who still hadn't decided, visibly, agonizingly hadn't decided, which side of this he was standing on. Your daughter, she said carefully. Is she in one of these systems too? A number instead of a name. Osric flinched like she'd struck him. No, he whispered. Not yet. Then help me make sure she never has to be, Nyvenne said. Help me finish this. He didn't answer with words. He answered by turning, jamming his own access card into the terminal's secondary port and doubling the download speed with clearance codes Nyvenne didn't have. 80%, Priya said in her ear, disbelief plain in her voice. 90. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Patrol, returning exactly on schedule, exactly as Priya had warned. Go, Osric said, yanking the completed drive free and pressing it into Nyvenne's hand. I'll cover the door, tell them I overpowered you, tell them anything, just go. She hesitated at the threshold, looking back at a man who 20 minutes ago had nearly ended everything they'd built. "Come with us," she said. "They'll know it was me either way," Osric said, managing something like a smile. "Better they think I fought you and lost than that I planned this. My daughter needs at least one of her parents to still have a clean record when this is over." The footsteps in the corridor grew louder. "Go," he said again. And this time, she went. She made it back through the maintenance shaft with the patrol's flashlight beams sweeping the grating above her head, close enough that she could hear them discussing lunch schedules, utterly unaware of the alien pressed flat against the ceiling pipe 6 feet above their boots. When she finally dropped back into the supply closet war room, Callum was on his feet before she'd even landed, checking her over for injuries with hands that hadn't stopped shaking since she left. "I'm fine," she said, pressing the data drive into Priya's waiting palm. "Bell isn't coming. But he got us what we needed." Dresk's expression darkened. "A traitor helping us doesn't undo what he already did." "No," Nyvenne agreed quietly, "but it might undo what he was about to become." With the Bay 4 archive folded into the broadcast, Priya finished the final compilation in under 4 hours. No longer a single facility's dirty secret, but proof of a pattern spanning at least 3 processing centers, cross-referenced, time-stamped, undeniable. "This isn't just going to embarrass them anymore," she said, staring at the finished file like it might explode in her hands. "This is going to reach the Concord Oversight Senate feeds. This is going to reach everyone." "Then push it," Nyvenne said. Priya's finger hovered over the key. For 3 full seconds, absolutely nothing happened. Then every screen on the station went black at once and came back showing something no citizen of the Concord had ever been meant to see. Rows of containment pods, genetic extraction logs scrolling in real time, a recording of a Threll child, restrained, pleading in a language the system had auto-translated with brutal, clinical accuracy. "Please, I want to go home." Somewhere in the station, an alarm began to wail. Somewhere else, dozens of alarms answered it. In the docking bay, soldiers froze mid-patrol, staring up at monitors none of them could look away from. In the officer's mess, a captain's fork clattered to his plate, forgotten. In a maintenance corridor 3 decks down, an old engineer, Callum's own supervisor, sat down heavily on an upturned crate and put his head in his hands. And in processing bay 9, the overseer in charge of that week's yield collection reached for the emergency shutdown override. His hand never made it to the panel. Dresk was already there, 4 arms braced against the console, blocking it with the sheer immovable mass of his body. "You don't get to hide this again," he said, voice a low rumble that carried through the whole chamber. The overseer's hand drifted, instead, toward the sidearm at his hip. He never got the chance to draw it. A single shot rang out from somewhere behind him. Not fatal, precise, aimed to disable. And the overseer crumpled with a cry, clutching his shoulder. Nyvenne lowered the confiscated pistol slowly, her hands trembling, her heart hammering harder than it ever had in 412 days of captivity. She had sworn, on the day the Concord took her, that she would never become what they claimed her people were. She had just broken that vow to save 100 lives, and she wasn't sure yet if she'd forgive herself for it. By the time station security finally regained partial control of the broadcast, it no longer mattered. The footage had already reached every docked freighter, every relay buoy, every private terminal within 3 systems, and as Priya had promised, the emergency oversight feed used by the Concord Senate's own investigative office. Within the hour, 3 separate freight crews refused to undock until an independent tribunal was called. Within the day, 2 more processing stations went dark, not from Concord orders but from their own staff walking out. The first crack in the wall is always the loudest, but it wasn't the only wall. 6 days after the broadcast, with Facility 9 formally seized by an emergency Senate tribunal and its overseers detained pending investigation, Priya pulled Nyvenne aside with a face gone pale under the harsh corridor lighting. "There's a problem," she said, turning her tablet around. "Facility 6, half a system away. They're not shutting down for the tribunal. They're evacuating," Callum said grimly, reading over her shoulder. erasing the evidence before anyone can reach it. Nyvenne felt something cold settle in her chest. "How many are still inside?" she asked. Priya's answer came quiet and final. 211. The tribunal ships couldn't reach Facility 6 for 11 more days. Too far, too slow, tangled in Concord bureaucracy that hadn't caught up to how fast the truth had spread. 11 days was more than enough time to erase 211 names from every record that mattered. "We can't wait for permission," Dresk said, already checking the charge on a confiscated rifle. "Not this time." For once, Nyvenne didn't argue with him. "No," she agreed. "This time we go first." Getting to Facility 6 meant borrowing a decommissioned Concord transport shuttle that Priya rewired in under 6 hours, running on stolen fuel credits and a forged manifest that listed their cargo as recovered maintenance equipment. It wasn't entirely a lie. Callum sat in the pilot's seat, hands steady now in a way they hadn't been since the night he'd first opened Nyvenne's cuffs. Dresk checked his weapon for the 4th time. Osric, who'd insisted, against everyone's better judgment, on coming along once his own hearing had been quietly dismissed by a sympathetic tribunal officer, sat with a tablet full of stolen access codes. And Nyvenne sat at the small viewport, watching unfamiliar stars slide past, wondering how many more facilities like this existed in the dark beyond them. Facility 6 looked nothing like Facility 9 from the outside, sleeker, newer, built into the hollowed-out shell of a mining asteroid, rather than a station in open space. But the smell, when the airlock finally cycled open, was exactly the same. Ozone, antiseptic, fear. "Security's lighter than I expected," Priya murmured through their comm channel, monitoring the station's internal network from the shuttle. "They really are just running. Overseers first, captives left behind." "Then let's not disappoint them," Dresk said grimly and moved into the corridor first. They found the first holding block within minutes. Rows of cells, most already emptied. Evidence of a hurried evacuation scattered across the floor. Discarded restraints. A dropped ration pack. A child's shoe alone in the corridor. Its owner nowhere in sight. Nyvenne knelt and picked it up without quite meaning to. "They're moving the valuable ones first," Osric said, reading from a stolen manifest on his tablet, voice tight. "The ones with the best yield markers. The rest—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "Where?" Nyvenne said, standing. "Are the rest?" The answer came from Callum, monitoring a secondary security feed over Priya's shoulder from the shuttle. "Lower processing deck," he said, voice grim. "They've got them sealed in a cargo hold. Looks like they're prepping the whole section for—" He stopped. "For what?" Nyvenne demanded. "For venting," he said quietly. "They're going to space the whole hold rather than let the tribunal find it intact." There wasn't time for a plan. There wasn't time for anything except moving faster than Nyvenne had ever moved in her life. Dresk's heavier footsteps pounding just behind her, both of them following Osric's stolen access codes through corridor after corridor toward a cargo bay door already flashing amber with a decompression countdown. 2 minutes, Priya's voice said in her ear, tighter than Nyvenne had ever heard it. "Override's not accepting Osric's clearance. It's locked to command level." "Then I need command level clearance," Nyvenne said, sprinting the final stretch. "There isn't time to—" "Then find me a person who has it," she snapped. "Because I am not letting 211 people die behind a door." They found him in the security office 1 corridor over, the facility's junior overseer, hastily packing a bag of personal effects. Clearly the one who'd drawn the short straw of staying behind to authorize the final venting sequence before making his own escape. He looked up as Dresk's shadow filled the doorway, and his hand went for a sidearm that never cleared its holster. "Override the countdown," Nyvenne said, stepping past Dresk with the same confiscated pistol from Facility 9 still steady in her hand. "Now." "You don't understand what's in there," the overseer said, backing against his own desk. "Half of them are already beyond salvage. The regeneration failures alone." "They are people," Nyvenne said, voice shaking with something closer to fury than she'd let herself feel in 412 days. "Override it." For a moment, she thought he would refuse. thought Dresk's patience, never abundant to begin with, would run out before the overseers did. Then, hands trembling, he turned to his terminal and entered a command sequence. Somewhere below them, the amber countdown flashing across every screen in the corridor shifted, at the last possible second, back to green. 90 seconds to spare, Priya said in Nyvenne's ear, audibly shaking with relief. You cut that closer than I ever want to hear about again. One more before the ending, promise. Subscribe if you're enjoying this one. The cargo hold, when they finally cracked it open, held exactly the kind of scene Nyvenne had spent 412 days trying not to imagine in detail. 211 beings, Threll, Ordu, Kryven, 3 species Nyvenne had never even seen before, all crammed into a space built for cargo crates, not living creatures, blinking against sudden light, flinching from sudden sound, unable to fully believe the door had opened for any reason other than what they'd been told to expect. An elderly Ordu near the front reached out one trembling hand toward Nyvenne, touching her scaled arm as if to confirm she was real. Is it over? He whispered. Is it finally over? Nyvenne knelt in front of him, meeting his eyes. Not yet, she said honestly. But it's starting to be. Evacuating 211 survivors from a single shuttle built for 6 was, by any practical measure, impossible. A fact Priya pointed out no fewer than 4 times over the comm channel while simultaneously solving the problem anyway, hailing 3 of the freighter crews who'd refused to undock back at Facility 9, and redirecting them mid-transit with nothing but sheer stubborn persistence and forged emergency transponder codes. By the time the first freighter docked at the asteroid's outer ring, word had already reached the Tribunal fleet, still 11 days out, but now moving at a pace that suggested someone, somewhere, had finally stopped treating this as a bureaucratic inconvenience. They're calling it the 6th facility incident already, Priya said, half laughing, half exhausted, as the last group of survivors filed aboard the 3rd freighter. Feels like it deserves a better name than that. Give it time, Callum said. Names have a way of finding themselves. The junior overseer who'd canceled the venting sequence was taken into tribunal custody without incident, his cooperation logged, his fate left to processes far above any of them. Osric watched him go with an expression Nyvenne recognized immediately, the particular weight of a man measuring his own choices against someone else's. He caved the second someone made him, Osric said quietly. I caved the second someone offered me something I wanted enough. You also fixed it, Nyvenne reminded him. Both of you did in the end. That has to count for something. Does it? Osric asked. She didn't have a clean answer for him. She wasn't sure anyone did. 3 weeks after the 6th facility incident, Nyvenne stood once more at the edge of what had been Processing Bay 9. Now stripped down to bare metal, its pods dismantled, its drift-fade lighting replaced with something warmer, softer, almost unrecognizable from the place she'd been dragged into 435 days earlier. Callum found her there, as he so often did now, quieter than usual. Tribunal's ruling came through, he said. Formal charges against Station Command, full independent audit of every facility on record. 61 names from your reef confirmed, cross-referenced, and released to any surviving Ashcael relatives who can be located. Nyvenne closed her eyes. Any relatives found? She asked, already knowing the answer, needing to hear it anyway. 2, Callum said gently. A cousin, and an aunt who thought you'd died with the rest of the reef. For the first time in 435 days, Nyvenne Ashcael allowed herself to cry. The rebuilding that followed wasn't clean, or quick, or free of setbacks. 2 more facilities resisted tribunal seizure long enough to destroy their own records before investigators arrived. A 3rd overseer, facing formal charges, took his own life, rather than testify to what he'd authorized. The Concord Senate itself split into factions, those demanding accountability, and those insisting the entire matter be quietly buried in the name of stability. But the footage didn't disappear. The names didn't disappear. And for every official who wanted the truth forgotten, 100 ordinary citizens, freight crews, Station workers, off-duty soldiers, had already seen enough to refuse forgetting on the Senate's behalf. The first crack in the wall had never really closed. It had just kept spreading. A year after the broadcast, on the anniversary of the night Callum Reyes first cracked open a maintenance panel in Processing Bay 9, a memorial was raised in that same bay. Not a statue, not a plaque, but a single screen, left permanently playing the original footage so that no one walking past could ever again claim they hadn't known. Priya rigged it herself. Older now, calmer in a way that surprised everyone who remembered the girl with the homemade signal jammer. Dresk stood guard the whole ceremony, arms crossed, daring anyone to suggest taking it down. Osric came too, his daughter's contract quietly released months earlier, holding her hand the entire time like he was afraid to let go. And Nyvenne placed a small, carved reef fish at the base of the screen, where morning light caught it every single day. Not everyone at the memorial was there to grieve or to celebrate. 3 Senate officials had made the trip as well. Official observers, they'd called themselves, though their real purpose became clear the moment the ceremony ended, and they cornered Nyvenne near the docking ring. Ambassador Callum Reyes, the eldest of them, introduced himself, extending a hand she didn't take. Senate Oversight Committee, I wanted to speak with you directly, given your visibility in all of this. My visibility, Nyvenne repeated flatly, is 435 days of captivity and 61 dead relatives. What do you want, Ambassador? Voss didn't flinch at her tone, which told her immediately he'd expected it. The committee is prepared to offer the Ashcael survivors a formal reparations package, he said. Resettlement rights, compensation, a permanent seat on the new Oversight Advisory Board. In exchange, we'd ask that future statements to the press go through official channels, coordinated messaging. Nothing you've said is inaccurate, you understand? We simply want to ensure the narrative remains constructive, going forward. Nyvenne studied him for a long moment. You want to buy my silence, she said, and call it a seat at the table. I want to prevent a panic that destabilizes 12 systems, Voss said, some of the diplomatic polish finally cracking. Do you have any idea what happens to interstellar shipping contracts if every citizen in Concord space starts questioning whether their cargo runs support something like this? Economies collapse. Real people, human, Threll, Kryven, all of them, lose everything they have. Accountability is important. So is stability. Funny, Nyvenne said. That's almost exactly what the overseer at Facility 6 told me, right before I made him override a decompression countdown killing 211 people. Voss's jaw tightened. That's not a fair comparison. No, she agreed. He was honest about which one mattered more to him. Callum found her 20 minutes later, still standing at the docking ring, watching the ambassador's shuttle pull away. Let me guess, he said. Reparations, with strings. He wants me quiet, Nyvenne said. Calls it stability. You going to take it? She considered the question longer than either of them expected. I'm going to take the resettlement rights, she said finally. My cousin and my aunt deserve that much, and so does every other survivor on that list. But the seat on his advisory board comes with conditions I'm not interested in accepting. And if he pushes back? Nyvenne allowed herself something close to a smile, thin, sharp, entirely unlike the frightened captive who'd first stepped out of Processing Bay 9. Then he'll learn the same thing every overseer on this station learned, she said. I don't stay quiet well. Osric's daughter Mira was waiting near the shuttle bay when Nyvenne and Callum finally made their way back, 11 years old, solemn in the particular way of children who'd grown up hearing adults whisper about debts and contracts instead of bedtime stories. She held something out toward Nyvenne with both hands. It was a small drawing, crayon on cheap recycled paper, of a bay full of screens, all of them showing the same word in careful, uneven letters. Free. Dad said you're the reason I don't have to pay off the school anymore, Mira said. I wanted you to have something. I don't really know how to make anything else yet. Nyvenne knelt to take it from her, throat tight. This is exactly right, she said. This is everything. It wasn't an ending. 11 more facilities remained unaccounted for, somewhere in the dark beyond the tribunal's reach, and Nyvenne already knew, the way she'd known the night Callum first opened her cuffs, that she wasn't finished yet. "Where next?" Callum asked, standing beside her as the small crowd began to disperse. Priya answered before Nyvenne could, walking up with her tablet held tight against her chest, an expression on her face that none of them had seen since the night this all began. Not triumph, not exhaustion, but something far more fragile. "Facility 11, she said, voice barely steady. "It came up in the 6-facility incident logs. Personnel transfer 8 months ago, logistics division." Nyvenne understood before she finished. "Your mother." "A name matching hers," Priya said. "I don't know if it's really her. I don't know if she's even still." She stopped herself, unable to finish the sentence, the same way Nyvenne once hadn't been able to finish hers about the Ashcael Tide clans. Callum put a steady hand on Priya's shoulder, the same quiet gesture he'd once used to steady Nyvenne's trembling hand in the square. The same unspoken promise passed forward. "Then that's where we go next," he said. Dresk was already checking the charge on his weapon, the gesture no longer one of barely restrained rage but of simple, practiced readiness. Osric adjusted his daughter's small hand in his own, and did not let go, even as he nodded toward the shuttle bay. "Wherever the names lead us," Nyvenne said again, softer this time, and meant it as a promise rather than a slogan. Behind them, the memorial screen played on, silent and unblinking, holding open a door that could never again be quietly closed. And somewhere in the dark beyond Facility 11, waiting to be found, another name was still counting the days. Thanks for watching. If you want more original HFY stories like this one, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload.